All right, everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Lasting Learning Podcast. I am so glad you're here and I am so glad you found us. If this is your first time here, you picked a great week to tune in. For those of you that have been here for a while, you know how this goes, and I'm sure that's why you're back because the last few weeks we've been just bringing some absolutely incredible people onto the show to talk about what makes them tick, to, to tell us what makes them wake up every single morning and keep doing what they're doing, and to tell us just why they're so amazing. And today we've got a good one. We've got another Michigander in the
Woo!
house. We've got Connie Hamilton here with us, who is just a teacher, a leader, an author, a speaker extraordinaire. She is super, super busy. She is living the dream, living the life, and just filled with energy. So, Connie, I am so glad that you are here with us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, there might still be a couple people out there in the world that have never heard of you before. I doubt it, but it's a possibility. This podcast go international. So, can you just take a minute and introduce yourself to the world?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm from Michigan. I live in Michigan, and I have been a teacher, principal, curriculum director, and now I have the privilege of waking up every day and taking the best parts of all of the jobs that I've had before and making a career out of it. And so I am able to work really closely with teachers and leaders and follow my passion around instruction. So I have a family with 3 kids and a husband in the Grand Rapids area in Michigan, and I have one left at home, one senior still left at home, and I have my middle boy is a Marine, and my oldest is a son at the College for Creative Studies in the Detroit area, which is a design school for art. So that's just a little bit about me.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, you really have done it all. You've been there, you've done that, you've got the street cred to go out there and say, here's what I have done. But yet, a lot of what you do isn't necessarily in your school building or your school district or even at home. So, can you talk a little bit about what it is that you do outside of the school systems, outside of your school
Yes.
system, I guess?
Yeah, so I deliver a lot of professional development, but really the majority of my days are not like your typical face-to-face PD. So the story behind that is years back, I was doing a workshop on the gradual release of responsibility with Doug Fisher and Nancy
Mhm.
Fry. And as I was leaving that particular school district, it was like your typical August, hey, we need somebody to do your back to school PD and we're going to do GRR and
Mhm.
could you come in? And so I went to the school and I left thinking there's no way, like they need more. This is not going to
I got the
stick.
rah rah, but where's the follow through? Yeah.
Yeah, like and as I was leaving home, I thought, what a hypocrite I am. I'm here, I'm talking to them about making sure that they have some direct instruction and a focus lesson and they have independent learning, but that they need to make sure that they are supporting students through the process by guiding their instruction and also offering them a chance for collaboration. And I know darn well their school district has no intent of providing any collaboration or guided instruction. It's going to be like, you are trained, go off and do gradual release of responsibility. And so I began to kind of reflect on what I was doing in my own district in Saranac. And I thought, man, I kind of do the same thing. We have our PD day and we say, you've been trained, now go do it without any opportunity for the teachers to feel like I can try. I know that it's not going to be perfect the first time. How am I going to go back and get some more information and support and work out the kinks? I don't even know what I don't know until I get in there and I fall on my face. And then when I fall on my face, then my choices are to say, that didn't work, I'm not doing it again, or to hide and continue to fail and try to figure it out on my own. So I really wanted to create a system that gave teachers supports that really mirrored what we wanted them to do in the classroom. And so from there, I developed this process, collaboration instructional feedback teams, where teams of teachers are observing one another, giving feedback after they have received some kind of training that they're trying to implement a particular strategy that we know is complex and that they're likely to have some some time that's going to be needed for them to really get comfortable with it. So it's designed to not be evaluative, but rather be supportive in an intensive structure of professional learning. So the majority of my days are spent in classrooms with teachers, getting inside their head, debriefing, brainstorming, reflecting, and just kind of helping them perfect their craft.
It's pretty cool. There's a few things I want to say about that. First, I've heard people say that when you have educators who are able to travel around and kind of make their own schedule and just go to the schools that they want to, they are living the dream. That they've got the easy job. I want to talk about that in a second and see if you
Sure.
agree. And secondly, I just want to honor the fact that you you are taking to life the whole idea of what we do, they do. And you said, if this is what we expect kids to do, why are we not modeling this and doing this for our teachers? Not just to model it just so we can put on the show and say this is what it looks like, but because you know it's best.
Mm-hmm.
And you could have just gone out there and done the big keynotes and just done the big speeches at the beginning of the school year and on those PD days, but you said, no, it's not good enough. It's not going to actually help teachers. So
Yeah,
kudos to you. So
thanks.
we'll go back to the other part now. So why did you decide then to take that leap and say, no, I'm actually going to do what is best, even though it's not easy? I guarantee it's not easy going out there and being in a variety of classrooms, school districts every single day.
I think as I've kind of gone through my career, there have been stages where I felt like I was getting, there were parts of my job, of every job that I had, that I really, really loved. And then I'm sure you and your listeners can relate. There's parts of our job we just don't like.
I hate writing
And,
grants. I'll just put that out there. I hate
oh,
grant writing.
see, I don't mind that. I
Okay.
don't mind that part. But like when I was a principal, the parts that I wasn't really super excited about when I was at the elementary level, like making the decision, are we going to have indoor or outdoor recess?
Yeah, yeah.
Or I remember the day when we ran out of French toast sticks and it ate up my, no pun intended, it ate up my, about half of my workday.
Wow.
It was kindergartners were crying because what we substituted was not French toast sticks, and
Yeah,
they
yeah.
didn't like what we had, and parents were upset because their kids went home hungry. And I just thought, what am I doing to improve student learning? And how am I supporting teachers to be able to do what it is that they do when I spend 3 hours worrying about the fact that we ran out of French toast sticks? So it was really kind of those moments when I began to get bogged down, and when I'm not excited to wake up in the morning, I'm thinking, oh, yeah, I wonder if we have enough French toast sticks today, as opposed to really focusing on the positive. And so
Yeah.
those are indicators to me that it's time to either take control of what I'm doing and change what I can change, or look for opportunities where I can really do more of the parts that I love. And this role allows me to do all the parts that I love. I get to collaborate. I get to learn. I mean, in order for me to teach others, I have to stay on top of things,
Yeah.
and it allows me to connect with really thoughtful people and share their work with others. And I just really love it. I wake up every day and I think, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this is a job.
Yeah. Have you ever had second thoughts and thought, man, I just need to go back to the stability of French toast sticks?
No,
No.
no. I mean, you wake up every day. A friend of mine once said, when I was kind of teetering around whether or not to go more to the consulting role and less to the public education role, said, you wake up every day unemployed when you're an independent consultant. And
Wow.
so you have to think about that. And so, yeah, you do wonder about your future. I mean, there are no sick days. There are none. When you have a contract and you have a school that has 100 teachers that are waiting and anxious to learn together, and they've taken the time out of their day to set aside learning, then it doesn't matter if you're not feeling 100%. You have to take the Dayquil and the NyQuil and mask it for 6 hours and put on 110%, and no one can ever know that you're not feeling 100%.
No.
So
Have you ever had experiences where you go into a school or a district and you are that outsider bringing something to them that they don't want? I know it's kind of different because you have a lot of people reaching out to you and saying, we need your support. But
mhm.
oftentimes that's the people in the suits, the people in our roles that pay the bills and pay the checks that reach out to you. But then you get yourself in a room in a crowd with teachers sometimes, and they might think, well, we don't need this. We're fine. Leave us alone. Yeah, I see your head nod.
Yep, 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 sure.
So how does that work there?
I think that happens in two levels. So you're right. When you do something and people come to you, that's not usually an issue. So if it's a conference or it's a workshop and
Yeah,
people are driving to attend, that's always a spongy crowd.
yeah, yeah.
People that want to soak up information. So sometimes what will happen is leaderships will come and they'll say, yeah, we're ready for this. And you'll have a few people. You'll have the table in the back, or you'll have just a couple of people that want to poke holes in what it is that you're saying. And but they're the few voices in the room. And so that's usually, to me, that's a challenge.
Mhm.
I often will then use the collaboration in the workshop to allow other voices besides just mine to also share when it's a mixed crowd. But once in a while, not very often, but once in a while, the leadership has a really different view of where their teachers are and what their teachers need
Okay.
than the collective group itself. And that is the time when I just kind of get real, and that's when you kind of abandon what you planned to do and pause for a moment, just have a conversation and find out, all right, where are you? Where is this coming from? What is it that you do know? How can I honor where you are? And then quickly diagnose, is this really an issue of, my gosh, we have this and for whatever reason leadership doesn't think that we do? Or is this an issue of, we believe that we have it, but we don't have the depth? Like we know the jargon and we know the buzzwords, but we're not really embracing it. And so my role is to bring those buzzwords to life and make sure that their their perception of what it is matches the research and what is out there that says it's going to be effective. Um, there are just a lot of buzzwords. For example, um, let's say people say, yeah, we do differentiation.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
that's a biggie,
yeah,
right? That's a big, everybody knows what differentiation is. No one's going to say to anyone, no, I don't differentiate. I think that's a bunch of baloney. We shouldn't have to do. No one's going to say that.
yeah.
Everyone is going to agree with the idea of differentiation. But do we really understand what it means to differentiate? It doesn't mean, which is a common misconception, that we dummy down for the kids that we think are the struggling learners, and then we have low, medium, and high expectations. Differentiation is not that at all. Differentiation is, we have a common expectation for everyone and we modify the route that students take in order to obtain that similar goal. We don't lower the bar for kids that need more time, or kids that need more practice, or kids that need a different perception. We model the approach. We modify the time. We modify the approach. We modify the examples. We don't modify the goal.
It's so good, and I hope people are resonating on that part because, oh, it's an extreme pet peeve of mine. If you give the NWEA test or the MSAP or the SAT or the PSAT, so that you can create your own little arbitrary cut scores and divide your class into thirds, so that you can teach 3 separate lessons with different ideas, expectations, and standards to kids. So hear that, rewind that, play it again if you're listening to this podcast on your way to work today. If you've got a lesson plan in your arsenal for today or tomorrow that involves something along those lines, tear it up, start from scratch, and make sure that all of your kids have the same standard. I've said before, standard is only standard if it's standard. If it's not standard, it's not a standard. So get to that standard.
Amen.
Amen. So thank you for saying that, Connie. I appreciate that. So you talk about your work in buildings and classrooms. A lot of times it's building this collaborative culture and just trying to give people common definitions, common expectations, common look fors when they're going into the classrooms and supporting each other so that they can, you're basically trying to coach coaches. You're trying to turn teachers into coaches so that they can support each other in the long term.
Mm-hmm.
Is that an accurate assessment? Okay.
Yep.
Yet you've done some work with Mark Barnes in the whole hacking series. If people aren't familiar with this, there's a bunch of books out there that talk about how to hack education and to to change things up and do things the right way. I heard recently when I was talking to somebody who also was part of the Mark Barnes hacking series, and they said they get some pushback sometimes from people because they think that with the hacks, they're trying to give quick fixes. That if you just do this quick fix, everything's going to change. But the work you're doing is not a quick fix. It's hard.
Mhm.
So talk a little bit about that dichotomy, if you will, between writing books about hacking questions, for example, that might make people think, oh, it's just easy. Just go do these quick things and everything's going to change in your room versus no, taking the time to dig deep and change your practice methodically and over time. I know that's kind of a
Yeah,
big abstract question, but
yeah. So I look at the Hack Learning series as a way of taking common problems and finding unique ways to solve those problems. And yeah, some of the hacks in different in various books do seem like, oh yeah, that's a quick fix. I could do that. It it gives the perception like it's doable, and
yeah,
that's the
which is the
goal.
beauty of it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, that's the goal. All of the authors and Mark Barnes is very, very clear as the publisher that it has to be doable. It has to be tangible. It's not a lot of philosophical background, but it really has to be something that teachers can do. As a matter of fact, every chapter in every book has a section that is what you can do tomorrow.
Yeah,
And the what you can do tomorrow section literally is that. And the editors are really good about making sure like, nah, you can't really do that tomorrow because you need to place a purchase order. It
yeah,
literally is. And so I can see why a reader might feel like, if I do these things, it's just going to fix everything. But I think that in looking at the series and kind of looking at the mindset of the authors, not just me, but really all of the Hack Learning authors, is it's about shifting the mindset. And so the idea around here is just creating out of the box ideas or different approaches, not complex,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but different. And it's about kind of making our lives a little easier and a little more concise so that we can get clear on what it is that we're trying to accomplish and that it doesn't become a checklist. And
Mm,
so it's not like, oh, check, we circled up, to looking like Hacking School Discipline talks about restorative circles and, oh, check, I had a circle in my classroom. So behavior is going to be suddenly all better. No, it's about the philosophy behind um, why it is that you're
yeah,
having, circling up and having group meetings. And for it, in my book, one of the chapters is about having all hands up and not necessarily calling on one kid at a time. So it's not like, oh, I did a whiteboard hold up, so check, all my students should be engaged 24/7 and, all of the time. But it's about, what is your default? Do you default to who can tell me, or raise your hand if you know? Or is your default thinking of ways that 25 out of 25 or 35 out of 35 students are actively engaging and thinking and processing the question that you threw out to the entire class, and
that's
then
good.
are satisfied with one person responding? So it's really about giving concrete examples on how to shift the way that you think about problems.
No, that's good. And I want to expound on that a little bit, if that's okay.
Mhm.
I'll talk about it through the adult lens and your professional learning and things like that that you do. So I went to a conference a few years ago and I was presenting and it was a large crowd. And as I was presenting, I remember I kept zeroing in on the couple people sitting in the front row because they were the ones that were nodding their heads. And if it was church, they were the ones saying preach, amen, and and I kept focusing in on them. There were probably 200 people in the room. And afterwards I thought, mic drop, I killed it. That was amazing because I had a pack of maybe 6 people that I spoke to the entire time that were nodding their head and affirming me that they got it. Fast forward at the end, I'm reading the survey results afterwards, and there must have been a dozen people that said, great content, but you only spoke to the people up front. So we kind of tuned you out. You didn't even acknowledge us. You didn't ask us where we were going. You didn't have any collaboration with anybody. You just kept having this banter with people up front. And man, did that hit me hard. It was a great wake up call and a great awakening. And that's an example that I use oftentimes with teachers in their classrooms as well. Because I think sometimes teachers do the same things in their classrooms. They do this whole formative assessment piece, I'm doing the air quotes, where they're
Mm-hmm.
trying to determine where the kids are in their understanding. And they're focusing in on one or two little Johnnies or Susies that are nodding their heads saying, yes, I understand, or can answer one singular question. So the teacher just moves on, leaving 28 out of 29 kids far, far, far behind. And so I love how you said it's, yes, there's a practical piece to this, but you also have to understand the why behind it. If you don't understand why you need to make these changes, you're just going to start passing out whiteboards. Everybody will hold up a whiteboard and you'll still want to look at Johnny and Susie as opposed to everybody to get universal understanding. So do you see that as one of the biggest needs in schools when you go into schools? Because I know, you've obviously got the Hacking Questions book. Is that your area of focus really, is the questioning? Do you see that as the pivot point for schools, or is there something bigger?
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, that's my passion. That's what I love to
Your
do.
expertise. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And so, but through the work that I've had with teachers, and I've been really fortunate to be in the right place at the right time, and to partner with some of my edu heroes. And so I've had the luxury of being able to learn about a variety of things and seeing how what might be seem to teachers might seem like, oh, this year our initiative is teacher clarity, and next year
Mhm.
our initiative is learning targets, and the next year our initiative is assessment, and it feels different. Like, oh, what's the new bus that's driving by our school district this year? And so I think that one of the things that I bring to the table in those conversations is layering those things to those concepts together to see how they're not different, and
Yeah,
how they build upon each other, and how they're all connected. So, you can't talk about quality questions or the delivery of questions without knowing what the purpose of the lesson is. I
yeah,
can't tell you if your question is, I mean, I can tell you if it's a DOK 2 or 1 or 4,
sure.
but it doesn't really matter if it's DOK 3 question if it doesn't align with what it is that you want students to learn for the day. It just
Hmm.
doesn't matter. It's actually, I would label that as a bad question, if it doesn't align with today's learning purpose. It's divergent. And so just because it's a high DOK does in and of itself doesn't make it a good question. So I think bringing those components in together, looking at equity, the way that you pose questions and how you allow students to respond to questions determines how equitable of a learning environment that you have. And so equity isn't different than questioning. It lives within questioning, and it can be the lens and the purpose for how you're making your decisions about how you pose and receive responses to your questions.
Yeah.
So yeah, questioning is my jive, but I try to make sure that it isn't superficial, and that there's a lot of depth to it, and that we include all of the other components that other people are experts on, and I
Right.
bring that layer in too, to say how does it apply to a variety of aspects that we need to think about around student learning.
That's good. So, I'm wondering about that. That I'm the one that called you an expert. You called it your jive. So I'll use
Yeah.
the word expert again.
Okay.
So you have this area of expertise, and some people would say, "Oh, you're an expert just simply because you wrote a book." Well, no, but it's a successful book, and a lot of people are reading this book and saying, "Oh, it's changing my life. It's changing my classroom." So you're an expert. At times, I wonder if that expert status gets in the way of the day job. And let me try to frame this a little bit. So recently, on one of my social media platforms, there was this big debate going on with other people that go out and present and share their ideas, consultants, if you will, who are talking about how difficult it can be sometimes to share in schools because there's this pushback of, oh, this is the expert, they don't live it, they forgot what it was like to be in the classroom, they just write books and they're in it for the money. So there's that piece of it. I'm wondering if
Definitely.
that's reality. Versus also in your own district, do people look at you and say, well, you're this expert. This is just your own little thing that you're focused on. You don't necessarily know our needs. You're the question lady. Of course, you're going to look at the questions. But I mean, do you find that awkward balance or that awkward struggle sometimes?
Um, I don't in my district. I
Awesome.
think that's because I've been there for a while.
Yeah.
And so I've been there, when I was just Connie Hamilton principal, Connie Hamilton curriculum director, Connie Hamilton, ooh, maybe we should learn something about questioning. Like they've been with me
They've been on the journey.
throughout my whole journey.
Yeah.
And honestly, they don't, once in a while, somebody in my district will say, wow, you're kind of a big deal. And I'll be like,
That's
no,
awesome.
I'm just the same. So, they know the real me, they know my family, they know my ups and downs, they know my struggles. They know where my weaknesses are. So, from that capacity, I'm very, very real, so I'll be really transparent. I work with when I was a principal, I had a co-principal, Jason Smith. He's now the superintendent, and we worked together. And there was never a better partnership that I had, in the sense of we got along and we filled each other's um, weaknesses.
Mm.
So he's a people person. He grew up in Saranac. He knows everybody. He knows your kids. He knows your grandparents. He knows who lived in your house before you lived in your house, etc. And when it came time for social events and grandparents day and parent teacher conferences, there's a lot of people there I didn't know. I didn't grow up there. And so he was the face of the school district, and shaking hands and having conversations with families and connecting people. And when families were struggling, he could come in and have conversations like, hey, let us help you out. What is it that you need, etc. And and I was able to then do the instruction and the curriculum and those components, and we fed together. And so Saranac knows, like, okay, if it's the homecoming parade, Connie might show up, but she's gonna be like, okay, yeah. So when I'm out and about, and people that don't know me, then they don't know that I'm a little bashful when it comes around people that I don't know, and I'm a little uncomfortable having small talk with strangers. And
Yeah.
they don't know that, because I don't have to showcase that side of my life. I can just focus on the areas where I am more comfortable. So I think that's a difference. And then to speak to the idea of you're the expert, and I try to be really real. I'm with teachers every day. I'm in their classrooms. I'm having conversations with them about what it is that they do and walk the walk. And I'm very mindful about making sure that the feedback that I give to teachers is doable,
Mm.
and that when I say something that I know is hard, that I say, yeah, easy for me to stand up here and say, just do X, Y, Z. And but this is hard. And making sure that I validate for teachers that here's what my experience says that your process and implementation is likely to be. The first step is you're going to have success with this, and you're going to begin to have some struggle with this, and you'll begin to second guess C. And so then when you get to that point, you'll know your next step is XYZ. And by then, I'll be back here in January and we'll talk about XYZ. So if you begin to struggle with XYZ, you're on the right track, you're making progress. And so I try to focus on where the struggles are likely to be, to keep them focused on. That's just part of learning. We do it for kids all the stinking time,
Right.
but we don't do it for ourselves. We don't highlight that, yes, you're going to have some success, but it isn't going to be perfect tomorrow.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And so that's the piece of, I try not to paint the rosy picture of the end result of where you're going to be in 2 years or where you have the potential to be in 2 years. I try to be real about, okay, here's the possibility, but here's the reality of where you're going to be in a month. Here's the reality of where you're going to be on this journey in 3 months, because it takes time to accomplish this. And they need to be able to recognize the steps forward, or they will very likely say, that didn't work. I'm not doing it anymore.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
what we don't want.
As a Michigan girl, you'll appreciate this analogy, I think. So here in Michigan, we have this area called Sleeping Bear Dunes. giant sand dunes that every summer people go and they take pictures and they try to climb and then they run down. But I equate what you just said with the idea of climbing a sand dune. It's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps forward. You're constantly sliding, but you're making progress. But you have to recognize that at times you're going to have to pause and catch your breath. And when you're doing that, your feet are going to slip and then you'll keep on moving.
Yep.
So in your own world right now, do you practice what you preach? Do you recognize that there are times where you personally or professionally are going to be slipping backwards? And
Yeah.
what does that look like for you?
I'm really hard on myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that oftentimes personally it results in like avoidance or
Mm,
procrastination, or like a lot of talk and not a lot of action around things that I know are challenging or are new to me initially. And then I
yeah.
have my go-to people. I have my people that I really trust and that I know that I can be vulnerable with. And Star Saxteen, I know that she's been on your podcast too, and she's one of those people for me. She's a
And let
person
me
that I
just
can
tell you,
call.
she is a rock star. She got me to cry online. Yeah, she's your go-to. You're gonna
Yeah,
be just fine.
she is special. She's
Yeah,
Yeah. So I believe Hacking Homework, which is the book that I know I'm segueing a little bit, but
you're good. Go for
let's
it.
give Star a little
Go for it.
accolades. I believe that hacking homework, that we are both very passionate about it and have strong feelings about homework, and it's a quality book. I think that the universe created that opportunity so that Star and I could become friends, because
Mhm.
the result of that is not only a good piece of text, but more importantly to me is just the friendship and the connection that we've made. When I go to New York, I stay with her. She's got
Wow,
a room. I'm allergic to her cat. She keeps the cat out of the room for me. I mean, it's great.
that's
So
awesome.
so anyway, back to what do I do when I'm faced with the challenge and I find that I'm slipping back. Once I roll up my sleeves and take a deep breath, and I get the motivation and the encouragement that I need through self-talk, or if I seek out to get that affirmation from elsewhere. Twitter is a good place for me to begin to
Mm,
just explore some resources, like who knows something about this, what's a hashtag where I can begin, how can I find some information. I mentioned before, I'm really fortunate to be connected to a lot of people, and so if I don't have somebody right in my Rolodex, kind of in my contacts, kind of showing my
yeah,
age
yeah,
there, if I don't have somebody in my contacts, then I have somebody in my contacts who has somebody in their
yes,
contacts.
yeah,
And so I'm not bashful about in saying, "Hey, do you know some place, or where should I go?" or throwing it out there. I have a pretty decent Twitter following, and so if I throw a question out there to say, "Hey, where do you go to get information on XYZ?" I know that my inbox is going to blow up with people who have answered that same question for themselves.
yeah,
Saves
yeah.
me a lot of time to know, where are the good resources. So I try
Again,
to do that.
it's you practicing what you preach.
I'm trying.
You go into schools to help teachers, but you're not just the sage on the stage telling teachers what they have to do better. You're trying to build up collaborative networks that they can help foster each other's growth. And that's what you do in the real world too. You don't
Hmm.
go out there and just search for the answers yourself. You say, there's people out there that know this stuff. Let me lean into them and they can help me grow as well. And I think not only does that give you street cred because you practice what you preach, it makes you real, which I think is what people really appreciate. They like that vulnerability where they say, this is a person that lives it. They walk the talk. So more kudos to you. You're killing
Thanks.
it.
That was the hardest part really about hacking questions, is once you write something and you know that it's going to be printed and
Yeah.
it's static. So when you do workshops, you learn and you're like, oh, that went well, that didn't go
Yeah.
well. That
Yeah.
was a really effective analogy that I used. I'm going to use that again. Or I got this great. You can change it every single time. When you write a book, there is no changing. And so that was the hardest thing for me to deal with. And I had conversations with Star. She's written so many books. I'm like, how do you get over the idea that, well, what if I learned something new, or what if I didn't dig deep enough, or what if a year from now, I think differently about it. And she said, this book represents the best of your thinking at the time of publication. That's why they have a copyright date.
Cool.
It just is what it is. And she suggested, if you really feel like that's going to be an issue, take one copy of your book, and every time you have a connection or a new thought or another angle to think about it, just annotate in the book. And then, when you're on blogs or your Twitter, those are the things that you can share live to say, here's some things that I've been thinking about since then or whatnot. And that helped me to be
Yeah,
able to say, all right, ink it.
that's awesome. That's awesome. So you talked about standards, you talk about success, you talk about the evolution of your own personal and professional growth. So what is success for Connie Hamilton?
That's a good question.
See, I've
I
learned
don't
from the question
know.
master. So
Yeah. I don't know. I think there are just little different pockets. I mean, right now I'm beyond. If you'd have asked me 10 years ago, what success looks like, I've surpassed even what the goals that I thought were attainable for me.
mm,
And that came from just being vulnerable and taking risks and dreaming beyond and not really having a ceiling. And so I don't know that I want to define what success will be, because I've tried to do that before and then that really wasn't the end result. So
mm,
I look at smaller successes, like, how do I know that this workshop is successful, or how, what are some of the goals that I have for, this book, or this particular teacher. What is it that I want to accomplish when I'm working hand in hand with this teacher? What do I want to see next month when I'm in her
right, right,
classroom again? So I try to do it a little more tangible, as
yeah,
opposed to pie in the sky, like, oh, I want to have X number of followers and I want to be number blah 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 and the Amazon's bestseller list. Like, I don't even look at that kind of stuff.
wow. Well, you're doing great with all those things. And I think that those are organic byproducts. It's like what we tell our teachers. If you chase the number, you'll never get it. It's like following a rainbow. You never get to the end of it. So quit chasing those standardized test scores and just deliver day to day, make those connections every single day, and the numbers take care of themselves. Your numbers are taking care of themselves because you're doing the hard work and the good work on a day to day basis. And I think it truly starts with how you opened up this conversation. You talked about your kids, and you didn't just say, "I've got 3 kids," and blah blah. You identified their successes, because I think that's your source of pride, is where they are, what they're doing. They're happy. I mean, people that might be listening to this and not watching this, you're surrounded right now by pictures of your family all around the room you're sitting in, which I think is
Yeah.
it's amazing. That's awesome, and so your successes are truly in the moments and in those small yet powerful moments that define your life, which is
Hmm.
so good, so cool.
Thank you.
So what's next for you?
I don't know. Right now, I need to get some focus and really figure out how to manage my time
Yeah,
and um, narrow what it is that I'm doing. I have my feelers out in a lot of different places, and
yeah,
so that's a piece. As much as I love what I do every day, it also, tying back into family. I'm on the road a lot. I'm away from
yeah.
them, and I do have a daughter who's still at home, and there are certain days on my calendar that I protect. Last night I got to go to a football game, and you're in Michigan, and you're on the east side of the state.
Her
I'm on the west side of the state, but it was 44 degrees and pouring rain,
in the middle of
and
October. Oh,
it was awful. It was
I bet. But
awful.
you went there. You did it.
I did and had I been home, and she even said, she's like, Mom, I know it's cold, I know it's miserable, you don't have to come. And I'm thinking, I couldn't go last week because I was out of the state, and so I'm not gonna miss this game. So I need to find a balance, around that. And my husband and I have been kind of waiting for this empty nest piece too. So I want to make sure that I can take advantage of that a little bit as well. So
Yeah. Good for
you
you.
know, I've
So listen,
devoted a lot
yeah,
of time to the profession, and I want to make sure that I reap the benefits that I've been working towards. So
good for you. Good for you. Living the dream. You really are. That's awesome. So Connie, I know you get to travel, you speak, you write a lot, but you have never been in front of an audience like this. This is the biggest, baddest podcast around. I keep saying that because I believe if you keep saying it, it'll happen. But so 7 billion people on the planet, every single one is tuning in somehow, some way through their device right now and listening to you speak. So imagine that they're all tuning in and they say, wow, Connie just transformed my life. I'm taking every single thing she says, and this is your last opportunity to speak to them. And you get to empower them to go do something, whether it's in schools, in classrooms, in education, parenting, whatever the case may be. What advice do you give to them right now to go out and just hack the world, hack life?
I think I'll take a couple of moments from our conversation and bring
Yeah.
that back. I think the idea of practice what you preach, and specifically around, um, we tell kids that it's okay to make mistakes. We tell students like that it's all right, you'll get better, you're capable of learning, and we rarely ever apply that to ourselves as educators. That
Yeah.
expectation is that we are perfect, that
Mm-hmm.
the first time that we try something, it's going to be successful, and it's unrealistic in many capacities. And so I think of being realistic, and yes, having that long-term goal, but also, thinking about the sand dunes and recognizing that progress is progress. And
Mm-hmm.
as long as you're moving in the right direction, um, lack of immediate success is not a reason to give up. And
Yes.
you would never ever encourage your students to give up just because they couldn't um, they couldn't achieve the success that they wanted in a short amount of time. And teachers are cheerleaders, and they're like, you're doing it, you're making progress, you're better than you were yesterday, and you're growing, you're getting there. And I would say, have that same self-talk.
Yeah.
Speak to
Absolutely.
yourself the same way that you speak to students, and give yourself a little bit of grace and allow yourself to grow, because otherwise you won't grow if you don't allow yourself to be vulnerable and take some risks. So
So
that
good.
would be my message.
That's so good. And I'll say, if you are in some sort of leadership capacity in a school or organization, take that to heart as well.
Amen.
Allow the people that you serve to make those mistakes. Don't go into every single classroom with a clipboard ready to evaluate and judge somebody. If you want people to be vulnerable, if you want them to be real, you have to allow them to mess up in front of you so that they can see that you'll reach down with that hand and pick them back up without slapping a label on them or wagging your finger in their face saying, you failed again in front of me. Ha ha ha. We're there to help and support and to serve. So take it and live it. Well, Connie, you are an absolute gem. I appreciate
Thank
the
you.
fact that you took time out of your schedule. Um, for people that don't know, we were recording this at like 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, the day after you froze your butt off at a football game. You could have just been all cozy in bed, trying to stay warm, sipping some coffee, but you got up bright and early to record this. You've got your coffee cup there. That's awesome. So as a person, I appreciate it. I took a lot of value out of this, and I guarantee people that are going to listen to this are going to be just saying, preach, amen, all
Thank
morning
you.
or all afternoon long when they listen. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It was joy.
Absolutely.